welcome to this press conference for the show Dustfall. I'm very glad to welcome the whole team. Xavier Marchand, producteur exécutif, Diane Taylor, the creator and writer, Juliet Stevenson, the actress, Deborah Balderstone, executive producer, and Daisy Gilbert, executive producer as well. Just to start, and the question is for pretty much everybody, we do see a lot of crime dramas on television. How is this one different, and what kind of tone did you want to give it, Diane?
I'm not really interested in straight detective crime stories at all. But what really attracted me to this one was the ability to really do something with the protagonist's character, Tig, and to bring so much more into the story than her just simply, solving the crime. So it's really about relationships with her mother, played by Juliet, and yeah, it's the territory is around sexual abuse and rape, and really I wanted to look at the ripple effects of that. So it's not so much just about finding the perpetrators, but looking at the consequences that extend out and out from these acts of violence, that extend to the families, that extend to the cops on a personal level, that extend to the medical staff. So that's what really intrigued me and what I feel makes it different.
And as producers, what did you see in this show that made you feel like it's not like all the other ones?
Well, I think, we were very thematically driven with it from the beginning. I think, as Di was saying, crime was the kind of wrapping for a much bigger story, and to look at the fallout of sexual assault, which is such a, universal crime, everyone is impacted, through 360 degrees. And so it's a kind of like Trojan horse of a story. There is, there's the unraveling crime and the detectives investigating it. But really we wanted to just do a very, very deep character dive into the ripples in the community and the people affected and the people investigating it. So that was the kind of guiding principle behind everything that we were doing creatively in telling that story.
Sorry, you have to speak just closer.
That was the guiding principle behind what we were doing, and everything was kind of built out from that perspective.
Any questions?
Hi, Noémie, for the public television in Belgium. I have a question for you. The show starts off like a classic drama, and then it shifts into, talking about rape culture and sexism. I was wondering, how did you approach combining these two elements in the show, like the crime and also the subtext?
Well, the crime, the solving the crime really provides the narrative drive, the real through line, I guess. I guess it creates tension and it creates a need to know for the audience, the classic sort of who's done it. But like I say, that's what you expect, of the genre. So that's not really intrinsically, the most interesting thing. So I suppose in writing it, you think about keeping that balance between driving the story forward, but returning always to the character and the impacts that story is having, sometimes in quite unpredictable ways. So you're always sort of coming back to the fact that these are, people that are flawed, that have families, so it's that constant balance always between the drive of the, you know, the cop detective narrative, and deep character work, I guess. Yeah.
Hello, Julie from France and TV series Burger. I was wondering how, which character, was the most difficult to write for you?
Well, I guess it's always going to be the rapist. I mean, I guess with any character, you just have to be so careful that you're not just sliding into another version of what we've already seen on TV. So you're looking for what makes that character different. I mean, I guess I think about it in terms of the relationships always. I mean, I'm writing Tig, the protagonist, and you see her in her work situation, you see her with her mother, Olivia, and that's a fraught relationship. So every character that you're setting them in scenes with gives more dimension to what was the question? Which character?
Give you the hardest.
The hardest.
Don't look at me. You're the writer.
I don't know. I don't know.
You just talked about Olivia, Juliet's character. Last year, Juliet, you were here for The Deal. Completely different characters, yet two strong women who know what they want. And I wondered how you got involved in this project, and what drew you to Olivia. What did you find interesting in her, and of course her relationship with Tig?
Well, for me, like for The Deal last year, for me, the most important thing is what is the whole script about. I don't actually, strangely enough, go straight to the character I've been asked to play. I go to what is this about? And for me, I'm always looking for material that speaks to the world that we're living in now. That's what makes sense to me of what I do. And this was a no-brainer because I feel very, very strongly about violence towards women. I think it sits incredibly low on the radar in almost every society. I mean, appallingly low in many societies, but pretty bad on the radar of so-called Western democracies. And, you know, it can't seem to retain a purchase. The question of rape and sexual violence towards women never seems to retain its purchase on anybody's list of what matters. Right? So it just keeps, something happens, everybody gets upset, and then it just disappears again. And it never creates a movement that grows until something is really, really done. And as we know, so often, as the extraordinary Giselle Pedicot said, you know, shame does not change sides. And her motto, I met her recently, which was an incredible privilege, and she said, you know, shame must change sides. And that motto is now spreading around. I was at a huge event with her in London, and the atmosphere amongst the 1,500 young women in the hall was like nothing I have ever come across. So it was a no-brainer, sorry, to get back to this very, very wonderful series, but it was that was why I wanted to do it. And it was written by an extraordinary writer, a woman, and it was produced by women and directed by a woman. It was also produced by a very wonderful man. And I think I want to say in that context that one of the best things about it is it really does avoid cliches. So we're not talking about the situation in which all the women are helpless victims and all the men are potentially rapists. There are some extraordinary men who because you're trying to find out who'd done it, you're looking all the time for what's that guy doing? What's his motivation? What's he like? And so you're looking at all these individuals, but in the process, as everybody has said, this sort of skeleton of a thriller whodunit. But as what's really interesting is how Di has used that, and then the flesh on that skeleton is all like behaviorism and expectations of both genders, and how both genders are subject to pressure to behave in certain ways. And the young boy, this incredibly beautiful portrayal, moving portrayal of this young boy, her boyfriend, who's suspected initially of the rape and so on, and what he goes through. So it's a really, really humane, sophisticated, nuanced look at this subject, but it still has a very, very strong punch in the middle of it about all kinds of violence towards women that just goes routinely unchallenged. So, yeah. And what I did in it, for me, she's a wonderful character and she's a problematic mother. But I like, as long as she's not an evil mother, because I'm really sick of playing those. And when you get over 50, you're almost always playing evil mothers or wonderful old grandmothers. So to play a complex, nuanced, multi-layered mother was a very refreshing opportunity.
So I couldn't say, which character I found the hardest to write, but the most fun to write was Olivia.
Yeah, she's good fun to play.
Laura Berny, Les Echos. The house in this series is a real character. How did you find it, and what's the story behind it?
The house was incredible, and that was our location scout who just found this place. It was a house that he'd known about for years, and it was actually an old Queenslander from Brisbane that the family had put on a truck and driven down to this spot in this beautiful valley. And he'd been wanting to find something for it for years, and we went there, and it felt so perfect. I mean, it was full of life and 30 years of this family. And so I think the process for our design team was in stripping that back and also thinking about the Nan character and how this house is representative of her, because she has passed away before the story begins, but she's so prevalent in Olivia and in Tig's story. And so thinking about all the knickknacks and all the choices, the design, the layers there, how they reflect kind of her as a ghost in the story. And then, through performance and the way that Olivia and Tig inhabit it, I think it comes alive even more. But we felt I think we were always kind of nervous about finding a place that would work so well, and we got very lucky to find this gem in such a beautiful place as well.
And the chickens were already there.
Yeah.
And the peacock. And the peacock.
And the snake?
The snake.
No, but I was wondering, because there is this house and then there are all these landscapes, the nature. It's very important with the scenes where Tig is driving, and it gives the show a very particular atmosphere. Was it already in the script, or did it come with Emma Freeman's, the director's work?
I think originally we thought it would be probably more traditionally tropical, so more palm trees and more of the sort of tropical environment. And then when we started looking at the actual environment where we were shooting, we found all of these rather opportunistic things, like all of the sugar cane and the big escarpment that was behind the house. And a lot of the driving scenes were very opportunistic that we were able to find by shooting on the Gold Coast for the Gold Coast, rather than trying to pretend it was a different region. So we were just incredibly lucky to find all of these. We really immersed ourselves in what else can we find. We wanted it to be a very distinctive landscape, and I think our location team did a phenomenal job.
Other questions? I had one. You started talking about it, Diane. Finn's character. Actually, Juliet, you started talking about it. How did you write this boy that seems to be really stuck between, on the one hand, how he should act as a boy, with his father putting a lot of pressure and all these rugby games that are, and on the other hand, he seems to be like sensitive.
Yeah, I guess the way I thought about Finn was that he's really, at his heart, the sort of young man that does give us much more hope for, the future relationships. He's stumbling, like so many young men, but he's pretty good at heart. And, just what happens when someone comes under that spotlight. And I guess, yeah, that was the starting point for it, that I always knew that he definitely, wasn't guilty, didn't have a part in it. And then I guess the idea kind of evolved that his suspicion of his father is like a suspicion of his father's sort of more old school masculinity. So it's really about a new, more evolved masculinity compared to his father's. His father's pretty brutal, and I wouldn't want to say too much more without giving too much away.
Of course. I was wondering what I found really striking in the show, and maybe Juliette, you sensed it too as an actress, is that it's very heavy. Obviously, the subject is very serious. There are a lot of violence, and yet it's still very sensitive. It's almost soft sometimes, and there is these relationships between the women in the show and this cop and with the victim. And I wondered if you had this in mind, writing something that is of course hard, but not always very violent. And when you played, when you acted in it, Juliette, if you felt it also.
Yeah. I guess it just comes from thinking about characters as people, rather than characters that are there to take the story from A to B to C to D. And I think that's what happens so much with, the genre, is that it feels like character work is kind of tacked on afterwards, but I can't work like that. I have to start with the character and do a real deep dive and a big explore on them, on their situation. And then when they're put under pressure, when the story puts them under pressure, how they're going to act. So, but you're talking about a sort of a softness that's there in the relationships. I don't know if it's so much soft, but I would hope perhaps it has an authenticity. That's what I would strive for. I found, writing Tig and Olivia's relationship really interesting, and the scene where you two fought with the chickens. Whew. I'm like, well, any mother that's ever had an argument with her daughter can feel that one. So, my job is to put the hint of it down on the page, but the performance is what takes it to the next level. That to me felt, oh boy, that took me back to a massive argument that I'd had with my daughter at one stage.
Yeah. I think it's just so brilliant what Diane created, really, because you would expect, there are many women who have had some form of abuse in this story, but the two key ones, I suppose, are is Evie, who's the young girl who's been raped at the beginning, and her mother you see brilliantly played by the actress. Just so wonderful. Who's Kate Box, who's just absolutely, her whole life is now just shaped around trying to salvage her daughter from this terrible, this sort of destructive act. Will she ever recover from it? Her beautiful, 18-year-old or whatever. And just, laying her entire soul on the line to try and salvage the situation. And you can sense that perhaps the marriage is going to suffer as a result. And then you've got this mother, who's a generation, she's a generation who was born probably in the late 50s. So therefore she was coming of age in the late 70s or the early 80s, as I did. And we were such a different generation. I was always, very engaged with women's issues, but we didn't have the language or the framework, and we considered that, sexual freedom was like really, just having sex with whoever asked you to. And there was never, my daughter, who's now 30, she has such a much stronger sense of what's okay and not okay. And so that meant that Olivia, when Tig, well, I don't know, I mustn't I must be wary of spoilers, I suppose. But when there are some, when it evolves that perhaps I wasn't as vigilant a mother as I could have been over my own daughter and what was happening to her when she was 16, 17. It's a very interesting territory. She's a gender studies. She teaches gender studies all over the world. She's a single mother. Where's the father? Nobody blames him, but he's not there. But Tig blames the mother, and the mother argues furiously that I was trying to earn a living. I was trying to give you freedom. But actually, what did freedom mean at that time? It meant, lack of vigilance over what was actually happening. And I think that's so that generation of woman, as opposed to the next generation, is a really sort of interesting. It's one of many, many threads in the piece, which I think is really interesting. But I think you're right about softness. And Tig has a lover, and this beautiful performance by this actor. So, she finds this in a very brutal life as a cop, as a policeman, and in her own life. But the tenderness she finds from this man who is really gentle and sensitive and understanding. So the portrayal of men and women is really complex and nuanced, and therefore it really has something to offer. There's no point in just extremes of good and bad people. You understand by this range of potential in both the men and the women in the piece. It's a really sort of humanitarian portrayal, I think, of that community.
Yeah. I really like what you said about not having the language, our generation, and I have 2 daughters, and I like the fact that our generation learns from a younger generation, and particularly around language. I mean, they always tell you if you get it wrong.
Yeah. And they're very quick to identify when you are doing what we always did, which was to internalize misogyny. We grew up so paranoid about not looking right, and especially as an actress. Somebody once said that being an actress is like being a woman twice. A friend of mine. That everything that you have to endure as a woman in the world, is doubly so as an actress. My daughter, as yours imagined I do, they're very quick to identify when I'm talking that way, and I've learnt a lot from her, and kind of rather envy the fact that we didn't have that growing up, so we were, a bit less armoured in difficult situations.
The danger that men represent for women, do you think it's the same in rural environment than in urban places?
I'm sorry, could you repeat? I'm a little deaf.
Yeah, sorry.
So
The danger that men represent for women, is it the same, you think, in urban environment than in rural places? In the countryside, do you think that men represent a different danger for girls in rural places?
In the countryside, as opposed to the cities, are men more like a threat in the countryside?
Is the threat different, I think?
I couldn't really say. I mean, personally, I've moved in the last 5 years from living in a city to living, not rurally, but in a much smaller town. What I find in living in a smaller town is that because everyone knows everyone in this community, there's actually a lot more caring and looking out for each other. I think in the city it's much easier to slip through the cracks and possibly to get away with bad behaviour. But I don't really know. Yeah.
Are you asking this because of the Pellico case, or?
No, not particularly because of the place where your story is happening. And I'm just trying to.
Sure. Yeah.
To figure out if it's different, and I think perhaps it is, but I don't know in which way.
I think the story could be told in the city, in the country. I don't think that that's the defining thing about it, really. Yeah.
I agree. I don't think it's particularly geographical. Sorry, I'm talking. No, go, guys. What do you think, guys?
Because I don't think I would protect my daughter in the same way in this kind of places than in a city, for example.
Yeah.
No, I'm taking the father kind of view.
Yeah.
I guess the threat looks different, doesn't it? Because when you've got the open expanse, in some ways that feels more threatening. But by the same token, if you're in a city, just the sheer number of people and the number of interactions you have feels threatening in a different way. So I would suggest that the risk is different, but probably equal in some ways.
Yeah.
But perhaps also in the countryside, I have the idea that you know people, you think to know people. And yeah, you have less opportunities to meet strangers, to, you know. I'm just trying to compare the way the places are safe for women to live.
It's a really interesting question, the more I think about it. Because on the one hand, you know, misogyny is not geographical, right? And we live in, you know, when we live in these viral places, and we know that the manosphere, you know, we know that there's these forces of misogyny and violence towards women are actually, they're not even in the city or the country, they're on the web, you know, they're on the internet. And so in that sense, I think it's geography is not relevant. But on the other hand, you know, you get a case like the Pellico case, which is interesting because everybody thought that they knew those guys. You know, they thought they knew all those guys. I mean, this was a village, you know, and everybody thought, well, I know him, the farmer, the baker, the whoever. And there were 50-something guys who were doing this, you know, over 10 years, and nobody noticed. So this notion that you live in a rural community and everybody is looking out for each other is a little strange. It's either not true, or people were covering up and just, you know, turning a blind eye or something. So in that sense, I think it's more dangerous. In the city, you know, I think if, in a way, the danger is clearer and more obvious. I mean, it's not so much perhaps something that would happen with people you knew, but obviously every woman now has to learn how to walk through the city at night or be on the tube and protect herself, which you can teach her as a father, but you can't protect her against the kind of things that went on in Provence, in that village where everybody, you know, didn't even see anything that looked like danger because they thought they knew those guys, but they didn't. And I think that's what's so extraordinary about that story, you know. So,
to complete what you've just said, we also know that violence against women often occurs in family circle as well. So I don't know if the city, the countryside, it's often someone we know. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, most violence, a lot of violence towards women, the killing of women in the UK anyway is very often by their partners, much more than by strangers.
I think, you know, there's a scene where the cops go into the school to talk separately to the boys and the girls, and, you know, one of the girls gets a little angry and says, you know, why is it always us that has to be careful? Why do we always... And, you know, that to me is a bloody good question too, that it's seen as, you know, girls have to learn how to keep themselves safe. Well, you know, why? It should be a collective responsibility that anyone who goes out should be safe. And that's where I do feel, you know, a little angry that we still do have to teach our girls to be safe. But, you know, it's a collective responsibility. It shouldn't be that way. We're all human, you know.
And the last question.
Yeah, just is it a story based on a true fact or something like that, or it's just pure fiction?
It's fiction, yeah.
It's based on a book by Vicky Petraitis. So it's based on a book, and then it's called...
No, it's called The Unbelieved.
The book is called The Unbelieved by Vicky, and Vicky's an interesting woman who also has a very successful true crime podcast, and she actually teaches young boys in schools about how to behave towards women. Yes.
Is there any similarities with Unbelievable?
Sorry?
Is there something, a link with Unbelievable, which is an American...
I don't know if it's published in France, but it's... I think
you mean the show on Netflix?
No.
It's a different book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
just a similar name.
Who is Unbelieved?
Sorry?
Who is the Unbelieved?
The book.
Who?
Yeah.
Who is Unbelieved?
So we moved away quite a lot from the book, but in the book there's a similar story of young women who are
not believed.
Unbelieved,
yes,
because of what happened to them.
This is not the subject here.
No.
Okay.
Well, thank you everyone for being here today.